Welcome to Forbes Newsroom. Joining me now is Leonard Armato, a contributor here at Forbes. Leonard, thank you so much for joining me today.
Oh, thank you, Brittany. It's so exciting to be on today and talk about this really interesting topic of Damar Hamlin. I mean, it's basically taken the nation by storm. People are riveted around it.
Of course, let's talk about first and foremost his recent developments. What have we learned most recently?
Yeah, so there's been some really positive developments. The team reported that he's now breathing on his own. He's speaking with his family. Looks like he's well on the way to recovery. And, I think when, he recovers, he's going to look at this whole ordeal and say, I did not suffer in vain. My life has a purpose. And I think there's like three major reasons why what happened to Damar will end up changing our culture for good. I mean, one of them is around CPR training and the importance of it right on the spot. Another is sort of the shift in the way that we look at these athletes on the field of competition, as opposed to looking at them like gladiators all the time. And then finally, this whole issue of guaranteed contracts and guaranteed pension benefits for players that are playing in the most dangerous of all sports. So we'll get into that in more detail, but I thought those are the three areas that are really interesting and on the top of people's minds right now.
Of course, let's kick it off from the top. You started off your article saying this is a wake-up call for the NFL. Let's start at the moment he suffered that really traumatic cardiac arrest. What vitally happened after the response?
It's so interesting, Brittany. I spoke with Dr. Mariel Jessup, Chief Science and Medical Officer for the American Heart Association. And she said that immediate attention, CPR and defibrillation and all those things are absolutely essential in saving lives. And luckily in this instance, the NFL was ready. The Cincinnati Bengals staff raced to the field and administered CPR. His heart was actually stopped and they got it going again. But just think about all those kids that are playing all over the country, athletic endeavors, football, basketball. And if this happens, CPR training, according to Dr. Jessup, is absolutely essential to saving lives. So that's one of the important messages that has come out of this tragic situation.
You also said this is going to inspire a shift of how we look at players. Can you speak more to that?
Yeah, so it's really interesting because, I've represented many, many NFL players in my career. One of the most notable players I represented was Ronnie Lott, who was a four-time Super Bowl champion, voted one of the greatest players in the history of the NFL and one of the most fierce tacklers of everyone in football. And I remember when he was playing, the attitude was, I'm a warrior, I'm from a military family, and when I'm on the field of play, it's like a battlefield. And I remember distinctly the way they talked about earning respect. And they would earn respect among their fellow players by knocking somebody out. Did you knock them out? If they knocked somebody out, they were revered. They were, congratulated. And if they were hurt, they were expected to continue to play under any circumstances. Now, think about this. When I was representing Ronnie, he suffered a serious injury to his finger. And we went into the doctor's office and I was with him. And the doctor said to him, I got good news and bad news. The good news is we're going to be able to save your finger. The bad news is you won't be able to play in the next game. And Ronnie said, well, wait a minute, I have to play. I have to play in the next game. What are my options? And the doctor said, well, take off the tip of your finger would be the only option. And he looked at me and he said, what shall I do? And I said, oh, wait a minute. I would never recommend that you cut off your finger. He says, no, cut off the finger, doctor. I have to play. Now, when Ronnie was asked about that years later, what he said was, I saw my other fellow players playing through injury, broken bones on the field. I'm from a military family, and this is like battle. And I'm a soldier, and I got to go out there and do it for my fans, do it for my team, do it for my family. That was the attitude. We're gladiators, he said. But looking back, he said, we need to have more compassion brought to the game. So it's really interesting, Brittany.
Yeah, a word that you used in your article a few times that stuck out to me was gladiators, describing these professional players as someone who's on the battlefield. Now, looking back years later, does Ronnie Lott regret this decision?
Yes, he said, I do regret that decision. I mean, he's lived with it and he's put it behind him. But he said, I was thinking to myself as a gladiator, we need to bring more compassion to the game. Now, think about how that basically relates to what happened to Damar. Think of the NFL's history. Go back to ancient Rome. The gladiators, they died, they carried them off. The next one came in and they fought to death and then they carried them off. That was sort of the mentality. But think about the NFL's history. Many years ago, there was a guy who died on the field through a heart attack. And, his name was Charles Frederick Hughes. They just carted him off. There's a famous picture of Dick Butkus looking at him and just sort of like, okay, he died of a heart attack, get him off the field. There's a very famous Jack Tatum hit on a guy named Darryl Stingley, which left him paralyzed for life. He was in a wheelchair until he died at the age of 55. He was carted off the field. The game went on. And this happened over and over and over again in the NFL, where serious injuries occurred and the game went on. But in the case of Damar Hamlin, the game stopped. The players looked, the players wept, the fans were mesmerized, the social media blew up, and the whole nation was looking at this with a different point of view. Instead of gladiators, they were thinking of them as human beings.
There was definitely more human empathy. I was reading your article, you highlight the piece by piece history of, you cart someone off and then you resume the game.
Yeah.
Just last Sunday, there were candlelight vigils for Damar Hamlin. Were you surprised that the game was halted and then eventually canceled?
Well, I don't know if I was surprised, but I think, to their credit, the NFL for years has tried to institute sort of changes that would protect the players more. And with all the research done on CTE and, the terrible implications of concussions on people's lives. And, so there's been a lot of focus on that. And you and I were chatting previously about the shift in attitude. I mean, back when I was growing up, nobody ever questioned whether anyone should or shouldn't play football. It was a natural thing for a kid to do, and parents were supportive. Today, if you ask parents, do you want your kid to play football? Mostly they're going to say no. And the reason is that it's such a dangerous, such a violent sport, and there's been so much research around what could happen to anyone who's participating in that sport, and there's been living examples of it.
Has the NFL made satisfactory strides when it comes to player safety?
I think they're doing all they can because their sport is inherently violent. I don't think there's anything you can do other than turn it into flag football. So they've tried to do what they can do, but think about this: players are bigger, are stronger, are faster, and the collisions are even more violent. Now they've done certain things like you can't spear with your helmet, you can't hit a defensive player. They try to protect the quarterback more. I mean, they're doing things, but they can only do so much and preserve the integrity of the game, which, by the way, Brittany, is the most popular sport in America.
You describe that as the elephant in the room. It's one of the most dangerous, arguably the most dangerous, but the most popular. I mean, it's America's sport. But how does the NFL treat their players differently compared to other major sports leagues?
Well, that is such a beautiful question, because that's where I think the NFL is going to get the most pressure out of this. And Damar Hamlin is the perfect storm, the perfect example of how the NFL's policy works to the detriment of these athletes that are risking their lives every single day when they're playing an NFL game. So, for example, the average career of an NFL athlete is roughly 3 years. An NBA athlete, 4.5 years, MLB, 5.5 years. So it's the shortest career span of any of the sports. It's also the only one of the major sports that doesn't guarantee the contracts of their players. Now, I know you had one of your colleagues, Jabari Young, talking about Deshaun
Watson.
Watson getting a big contract and it was guaranteed. Oh my gosh, it was guaranteed. Okay, well, that happens as a matter of course in every other major sport. And if you think about it, there is a very interesting rule that an NFL player is not vested until he's played 3+ years, which is about the average NFL career span. Vested means pension benefits, vested means medical benefits. So Damar, so happens, is in his second year. So think about it, life-threatening injury, no pension benefits, no medical benefits after his career's over, and his contract's not guaranteed. So I think there's going to be this huge pressure on the NFL to step up their game. By the way, I don't know if you heard, Brittany, but they just signed $100 billion in media deals. So it's not like they're hurting for money.
So if they're not hurting for money, why are the contracts not automatically guaranteed?
Because they're saving money by doing that. They're saving money, and there's more money in the coffers for the NFL owners. And I'm not saying they're greedy, but these are all multi-billionaires and they know how to make a profit. And one way to make a profit is by making a deal with your laborers, which provide you with more and more money in your coffers that can be viewed as profit. That's why NFL franchises are worth so much.
If the NFL isn't hurting for money, why aren't contracts automatically guaranteed?
Well, I think in any business, especially multi-billionaires, they have an incentive to make more and more profit. And by making the contracts not guaranteed, then they can extract more value. They can basically wipe away obligations that they have and put more money in their pockets. And that's probably why NFL franchises are worth so much, because they've been able, through collective bargaining, to secure so many benefits for the owners. And, the NFL, like you were saying earlier, is the most popular sport in America. And they just signed a $100 billion media contract. And there's no end in sight in terms of how the revenues are going to grow. So the least they can do is guarantee the contracts of these players that are risking their lives every single day on the field.
And you said that this is a wake-up call for the NFL. Do you think they heard it?
Well, I don't know if they heard it, but I think there's going to be a lot of public pressure on them to step up their game and treat players like the other major sports do, especially when they're the most dangerous sport, especially when their sport is the one with the shortest career span, and especially when they're the most valuable sport in terms of how much money they make through their media rights deal and through other sources of revenue. I think at last count, the NFL had about $20 billion in revenue a year compared to like the NBA that has like $10 billion. So, I mean, they're still significantly further ahead of every single league, and they don't guarantee contracts. What do you think about that, Brittany?
I think there's a lot of work to be done here for sure. And I can't wait to talk to you all about it. Leonard Armato, thank you so much.
Thank you. Appreciate it.